after he speaks, where he will take questions. So if you have questions, they've got cards back in the back, and you can give them to one of his staff folks, and they will then feed them to me after Congressman Fallon finishes talking. That is the only housekeeping I have. Restrooms are here, and that's about it. Congressman Pat Fallon has represented North Texans in the Texas legislature since 2013 and proudly serves today as a congressman for Texas' 4th Congressional District, where he serves over 700,000 great American bosses. The 4th Congressional District encompasses the 18 counties across northeast Texas, including all or part of the counties of Bowie, Camp, Cass, Collin, Delta, Fannin, Franklin, Grayson, Hopkins, Hunt, Lamar, Marion, Morris, Rains, Red River, Titus, Upshur, and Rockwall. Prior to his time in the Texas Senate, the House had enjoyed a decades-long successful entrepreneurial career, having founded over a dozen successful companies. To raise funds and awareness for pediatric cancer research, Pat entered what has been billed as the world's greatest endurance challenge. I call those council meetings. In 2016, he completed the World Marathon Challenge, a race where competitors attempt to run 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days on January 29th, 2016. Did you get that? 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days, becoming just the 15th person in the world to do so successfully. He was also the first and still only person to finish the World Marathon Challenge with no previous marathon experience, probably because the other guys died after trying to do it. Congressman Fallon is a proud graduate of the University of Notre Dame, where he played varsity football under legendary coach Lou Holtz and was a member of the 1988 National Championship team. Upon graduation, Pat received a commission to serve as an officer in the United States Air Force, where he was stationed at Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls. Did you get hazardous duty pay up there in Wichita Falls? I think you're stationed there. You absolutely should. Pat has been happily married to his lovely wife, Susan, for 16 years, and they have 2 boys, Thomas, 14, and Mac 11. Our Congressman Pat Fallon.
Is this on? Yes. Well, thank you very much. I was experiencing the best lobbyist for fixing roads in Texas, for the roads itself, when I was in the Texas House and Senate, because it's a little bit longer to get over here, because I think one of the most important things that you can do as a member of Congress is either knock on doors or have in-person town halls. I believe this is our 27th in-person town hall we've done in the district over the last 13 months, and this is the 4th one we've done in Rockwall. So it shows you that I love all of the current 18 counties and 12 that we'll have in the new district, but I love Rockwall just a little bit more. I wanted to start by sharing with you a little story on redistricting. And we finally have a map one of our state legislator friends gave us. I'm sorry, sir. What would you call this, peach? Coral. I don't like these middle colors. Yeah, anyway, this, not the green and not the blue. And, this is our district. And I can tell you a little bit of a story about why it looks so misshapen. It's because it's so special. But this used to be part of our district. And Louis Gohmert needed population, so I pretty much knew that we were going to lose some of the eastern portion. But there's also Republican and Democratic considerations. And this is I'm just speculating here, because the state legislature draw these maps, not the federal government. And there's going to be lawsuits, and there's lawsuits pending right now about this. So if I get deposed, I'll say I honestly don't know exactly what went down in Austin when they were speaking. So this was Congressional District 3. It was just in Collin County. The problem with it was there were so many people that had moved there over the last 10 years. There were supposed to be 670,000 people there. It grew to almost 1.1 million. So clearly, Van Taylor's district was going to have to shed population. But also, this was a district that Sam Johnson used to win by 30 percentage points in the general election. Donald Trump won that district by 1 percentage point in 2020. Now, the congressman at the time, Dan Taylor, is still the incumbent. He won it by 12, but you could see how it was tightening up. So it was also very clear to me that some of Collin County was probably going to come into Congressional District 4. But I made a promise. Casey Campbell's here, Jim Pruitt's here, Trace Johannesson is here, Patty Muggio's here. There's a lot of people that I made a just solemn vow to. Your better half, our lovely DA's here too. We had that discussion. It was, I think, the most conservative member of the Texas Senate last session, so I feel like I was vindicated in that choice. But Drew just owed me, and I said, I just have to have it. And he said, oh, man, the lieutenant governor's going to be so mad at me. He used a few other choice words. But I'll do it. For you, I'm a no. And then I knew Cal Seliger and Dan Patrick had a personal beef. So I called Cal Seliger up and I asked him, he goes, yeah, I'll do it, I'm a no. We got our 3 votes. So it was the map was going to fail. So they told the lieutenant governor that. I was in Washington, I got a phone call. It was late at night, like 10 o'clock at night. I got a phone call from the lieutenant governor. And he starts the conversation out by saying this. Okay, call off the dogs, Rockwall's back in. And he said, I got a lot of other things to talk about, so can we move on now? I promise it's going to be, I said, okay, thank you. And that's why, when you look at the map, there's a little bridge down Hunt County that connects Rains and the rest of the district to Rockwall. Because they couldn't come through, there's too many people in Collin County to come through that way. That's why it happened. Now this whole secondary arm occurred because Red River Army Depot, which accounts for about $1.7 billion worth of activity, is in Bowie County. And I had made a promise to those folks that I would always look after Red River Army Depot. And I'm on the Armed Services Committee. We were actually able to get, listen to this is out of Washington. Dick Durbin, that jackrabbit from Illinois. See, we're a mixed company, so I'm going to use euphemisms for other curse words. But that jackrabbit wanted to, because we had a problem with Humvees. They were getting blown up with improvised explosive devices, right? The IEDs. And then, so we fixed that by reinforcing it, but it made it top heavy. So now they're rolling over. And we've lost far too many service members to rollover accidents. So you can stabilize them, you can fix them, or you can buy new ones. But buying the new ones costs $13 billion extra dollars. If we just retrofit them, we can retrofit them for a couple $100 million. What does Durbin want to do? Why not? Because what's $13 billion? Because they manufacture them in Illinois, and that's where he represents in his senators. Anyway, we fought, and they were only going to give $10 million. We fought and we got the full $184 million for Red River and some of the other places. Going to save the taxpayers a lot of money. It was good, very good policy, but it was great politically out there for them because they could retain a couple hundred jobs. So we were able to do that. Anyway, long story short, we had Franklin County and then nothing else here. And I said, is there a way? I called up Brian Hughes, who was the senator. I said, Brian, is there any way we can get Red River into 4 so I can continue to look out for it? I mean, I promised him I'd look out for it even if I didn't represent him, but they really want me to. And he was able to do it. And there's only 7,000 people that live there. Little Rockwall, almost 110,000. And that huge expanse is about 5 times the land area, 7,000 people. But nonetheless, that's why we had that here. And I had represented a lot of City of Frisco in the State House and and I was on the City Council there. And so I just wanted it. That's why that's just to be honest. So that's the way it looks. It is, we won the old district in the general election by 53 percentage points. We'll win this one probably somewhere between, depending on the cycle, 25 to 32 points. So it's still a very safe Republican seat, but then this seat will probably win by 20 points now. So, and then Louis ended up getting out, he's going to run for AG, but this district got a population, and everything's a domino, because then he had a seat population to Lance Gooden at 5, and then Lance Gooden had a seat population to our friend, where is it? Oh, it's this one here, 6, and that's Jake Elsey, because that one was getting there. But you could literally teach a 3-credit college course on redistricting. It's fascinating how it all works out. But quick background on myself, very quickly, is I grew up in a small rural area. My parents were retired school teachers. I grew up in a house that cost $13,000, just recently sold for $75,000. And there's a lot to be said for growing up, I think, in humble beginnings. I've never judged anybody by the size of their wallet, whether it's thick or thin. It doesn't matter. It's the size of their heart that matters. I've never seen a tombstone that had an epitaph that said he had a big house. I've never seen that. You don't see that? Or that she had a fast car, or they had piles of money. It's always on how you lived your life, how you treated others, how you loved others, and what you accomplished for others. And that's very important. But our parents taught us the value of a hard day's work and how important an education was. And to the best of your ability, love your neighbor. And that's very difficult for me sometimes when I'm driving on the passing lane and you're driving too slow in front of me. That's difficult to do sometimes. But we're going to get there. If you keep praying for me, we might make it. And then I didn't know, most kids, when you ask them, they're 18, 19 years old, what political party do they belong to? A lot of them don't realize it or don't really think much about it. And I never knew. I grew up in a small town just northeast of Dallas called Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I didn't know. I thought I was a Democrat because everybody seemed to be Democrats up there. We did have a Republican congressman, the last one from Massachusetts, because it was a rural area. But Democrats back 40 years ago were much different than they are now. I mean, they love America. When I'm knocking doors now, you can ask anybody that's in here as a politician, or actually say an office seeker or holder, because we don't want to be politicians, we want to be conservative fighters. But when you knock on doors, it's sad when you knock on this door and talk to this great gentleman, David, because he's a great voter, and then I got to skip 17 houses to get to the next really great voter. What's wrong with the 15, 16 in between? I mean, that's why we have a $29 trillion debt, because they're not participating. We can't have a vibrant representative republic if people they don't have any skin in the game. I mean, I don't have any, I categorically reject anybody running for office if they don't vote themselves. When they're a grown person. If I look your record up and you're missing half of the elections, I'm not voting for you. And no, it's not good enough just to vote every 4 years for president. There are school board races, there are city council races, there's special elections, there's special bond elections, there's constitutional elections. I want you to vote every time. I mean, if you miss one, okay, that's fine, but I haven't missed an election in 14 years. None, zero, made up all. Because you gotta have that spirit.
That's being an American citizen. What we are seeing right now is in our culture, people have forgotten our freedom must be fought for. And we are at a really scary place.
Lynn, you sound like me, and you're a political refugee from somewhere. Where are you from?
Michigan.
She's from Michigan.
And I used to be a Democrat until we came to Texas, and I saw that the less government you have, and the less bureaucracy, the better everybody does. And Democrats move us from freedom and a republic, and what they want to do is take us down the road of communism and Stalinism and all that other nonsense. We better get up off our butts.
I'm glad that Lynn's now running for this office.
Maybe she is.
And get those guys out of jail that are sitting and rotting in Washington, D.C.
Are the acoustics good enough to where you can hear me without the mic?
Yes, like now.
Can you all hear me? Or should I do this? This no. But that was amazing. The projection was great. He was a teacher like my parents. I have a book of every person that's probably going to vote this election. It's a secret sauce number, and on March 2nd, I'll tell you what it is. And we rate it a certain way. And so to have a perfect score is a 53. And the book is about this thick, and the perfect scores are about like that thick. And I love calling the perfect scores, because I'll tell them, and this is Pat Fallon, your congressman, I represent you in Washington. You're literally the best voter out of 770,000 people. And the reactions are varied, but really fun. I did that once. I knocked on the door of a fellow who was a state rep in the Colony, Texas. And I told him, he was 45 years old or so. And I said, you're the best voter in the city of the Colony. Like, no one has a better voting record than you. And he smiled and he got excited. I said, really? I said, yes. He said, will you call my dad? And his dad lived in the colony, who was a really good voter, but he wasn't as good as his son. And I got 2 yard signs out of that doorknob. So it was a really good doorknob. But it is so important to have skin in the game, as you're saying, because you're going to lose the country if we get complacent. I'll give you a perfect example of how you have to remain ever vigilant. Even when you pass a law that you want, you've got to enforce that law. We're seeing it on the board right now. We have plenty of immigration laws that Joe Biden's just looking the other way. And I just was on Newsmax earlier today, and we talked about that. Enforce the laws. How about this? Letting the Border Patrol do their jobs. So I got elected in 2012. I ran against a surrogate of the Speaker of the House at that time, a fellow named Joe Strauss. They had picked somebody to run for that seat. They funded her. And we just outworked her. I think, honestly, we outsmarted her. We had a better record. And we ended up beating her by 42 percentage points in the election. So that was really a great thing. It was 72-28, so maybe 44 points. But so I won. We won, really, because you have to be careful in campaigns about pronouns. It's not I and me, it's we and us. And it really is. So we won. And I hadn't served a stitch yet. My wife calls me. She's watching. You love this stuff. She's watching TV news. And she freezes it. And she has me come in. She says, "Honey, get in here." Yes, darling. And she says, "I want you to watch this." It was a piece on a piece of legislation, HB 308. It was the Merry Christmas bill. And it was written by a fellow named Dwayne Bowick, a Houston Republican. And he basically what it did was it codified into Texas law that teachers, students, and parents would be protected if they wanted to have a Christmas party, or say Happy Hanukkah, or Merry Christmas, or wear Christmas clothing. And if the ACLU or anybody else sued, the state of Texas would intercede on their behalf, on the behalf of religious liberty. And it wouldn't cost the ISD taxpayers a dime. Very good piece of legislation. And my wife, as a God-fearing, American-loving patriot, looks right at me, pierces right through me, and she says, "You want to give me an early Christmas gift? You make sure this bill becomes law." I don't know how to do that at the time, but I mustered up as much machismo and bravado as I could, and I said, "You got it, baby." We get sworn in January 12th. I make a beeline to Dwayne Bowick, I tell him the story, and he goes, "Pat, that's great, because we're coming off a redistricting year like we will in January 23. And he said, "We've got 43 new freshman members. And I want you to be the liaison for the freshman class, because there's only 150 total members, almost, a third of the body's new. And I want Republicans and Democrats on this, because this is Texas. We're not California, we're not New York. And I want it to, be a bipartisan bill that is passed into law." And it was. I co-authored the bill with Dwayne. I championed it with Dwayne. We got it passed out of the House, Senate. Governor Perry signed it into law in 2013. So it was a huge success. But almost right after we got out of session, that next Christmas, there was no kidding an ISD that was putting the word out via their PTAs, no green or red plates at our winter party. What is a winter party? Are we celebrating, are we a bunch of Norsemen celebrating the winter solstice? It's a Christmas party. You don't have to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, but Christmas is a federal holiday. That's why we're taking a break. It's not because of some Norseman or it's the shortest day of the year. Anyhow. And so I went to the school board first, right? You use your chain of command. And then I went to the superintendent, and they still were doing the policy on the slide. So then we went to the press, and then we had a big dust-up. It went all the way to the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. He made a joke about green and red plates in Frisco, Texas. He says, "You better be careful, you might get in jail," right? Well, that stopped it, but it's about being vigilant and enforcing that. And it's a very small world, because the next year, the Dallas Cowboys were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars in London, England. And I'd always want to have a meeting, it's kind of a bucket list thing, in the Parliament building in London. We have a beautiful building there. So my staff had set up a couple of meetings with conservative members of Parliament. The first guy we met with, we had high tea in the House of Lords. It doesn't get any stuffier than that at all. And then the second guy was really dynamic, because in the parliamentary system, you have to be a member of Parliament to be in the cabinet. Not like here. You have to be in the Parliament to be Prime Minister. And work your way up, you can be an undersecretary to one of these cabinet ministers. And this fella, the second guy we met with, was. And he was really damaged. He was a short fella. And he walks in the room, which just has a presence right away. And he looks and he says, "Where's Pat Fallon? The man who saved Christmas." Some of those, you can't make up certain things. But then, dialing back, I had been a conservative activist since I was a kid. I graduated from University of Notre Dame, but my freshman year, I was at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Incredibly liberal. We used to call it Berkeley on the East Coast. Incredibly liberal place. Where I'm walking home from class, I'm an 18-year-old kid. And I see, remember this lady? Amy Carter, Jimmy Carter's daughter. Remember her? She was at Brown University. She was really smart. And she was at UMass protesting because they allowed the CIA to recruit prospective college graduates, And they said, well, the CIA breaks international law. It says in the bylaws you can't allow lawbreakers to recruit on campus. So they had a protest where they were trying to burn American flags. They weren't smart enough to light them on fire because hippies aren't good with campfires, apparently. I don't think they were Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. But I was just walking back from class, and I was 18. I don't know if I'm a Republican or Democrat, but I knew one thing. I love this country. And I was a patriot. Now, there's only one home for God-fearing, American-loving patriots, and that's the Republican Party. Clearly, the Democrats don't want you anymore. And I stopped, and I could not go home. I couldn't go to my dorm room. This was an injustice. This is the greatest country history's ever known. And they're trying to burn our flags. Who the hell are they? And did a counter-protest. And there was at least 100 of these hippies. And they surrounded us, and they were like an adolescent bear. They were trying to intimidate us. Well, we stood our ground, literally and figuratively, for our country. I should have known right then and there that I was a Republican. But I had it, and it woke me up. And you know what? I ended up serving in the student senate. And the first night I was there, they tried to gift $3,000 of student money to the Young Communist League so they could go protest in D.C. That was a hard no on that one. We actually ended up winning the day there. There was enough kids in the Texas Senate, or sorry, I keep saying Texas Senate, but the U.S. Senate, where we denied them the money. It's just a little thing. But I've always been a student of, if you want to change the world, change your small part of it. That's the way we can save the world, is looking at it like that. You don't have to be MacArthur. You don't have to be Churchill. You can do your part. We're all small cogs in a larger and greater machine. And then I served in the Air Force. They paid for my college. They gave me my first job. And I knew right then, at that moment, that I owed a debt to our country. And I planned on repaying it. And I said, someday I'm going to serve this country again. I don't know exactly what capacity. Maybe I'll run for office. Maybe I'll just volunteer because I've been volunteering. Like so many people do, and that's a good thing. You want to create jobs and opportunity and get outside your comfort zone and take those risks. And then Barack Obama was elected president. Oh, I know, thank you. Lynn said, you're right. And I was yelling at the TV. I wore black for a month because I was in mourning. And then my wife said, anger in and of itself isn't a sin, but you've got to channel this in some more healthy way. And I said, well, baby, what do you want me to do? The next election's not until March of 2010. I wasn't thinking. There was a school board and city council race in May. She goes, you could run for city council. Because there was a gal, and I hate to put labels on things, but that was part of, for lack of a better term, maybe the establishment. And she was blessed that she was going to win the race. And there were two other people that didn't have a chance. And I ran not to run. I ran because I thought I could do a better job. Because she was very in tune with, and again, nothing wrong with being wealthy. Nothing wrong with it at all. But you can have an attitude that you're better than people. And there is something wrong with that. And she had that attitude. And she belonged to a country club. Nothing wrong with golf and playing tennis and enjoying the finer things. But she, case in point, our last debate. She gets up there in a crowd about this size, and she says, you know, we're going to win this race because a lot of prominent people in the city are supporting me. I wait until it's my turn, I take the mic, and I don't address the audience at first, I address her. And I said, you know what? There was 100,000 people in our town at the time. The last time I checked, I thought there were 100,000 prominent people in this city. How dare you say that? To give more weight and value to one person over another. That is not your place. I said, you know what I've done in the last 4 months of this campaign? I've knocked down 1,287 doors that opened, and we had a conversation. She went white. There's only 3,500 people going to vote. That's half of them. We had our talks. And I will make a confession here. But I looked right at him and I said, I don't care if you belong to the Boys and Girls Club or the Country Club. You matter. And we need council members and other elected folks that realize that. And will be a fierce advocate for everybody that lives in their city, their district, their state, what have you. Now, she heard about that 1,247 number, she got scared. So she starts knocking doors in this neighborhood that I'd already all knocked. So they're friends of mine by this point. Somebody calls me and says, hey, Pat, your opponent was out here knocking doors. I said, really? So I go re-canvass it. And I knock on this one fella's door, who I probably went home the first time I went. We have a nice talk. And he said, oh, no, I just met Pat Fallon a few days ago. I really liked her. Now, that was 13 years ago, so I believe the statute of limitations, if I'm correct, is out. So I'll tell you, maybe I'll spend a little extra time in purgatory for this one. But I said, yeah, she's great, isn't she? Would you like one of her yard signs? And he said, yes. And I put it in there. And that's how I was leaving Gary. I said, make sure you vote on D1. We're really coming. But we won that race by more than one vote, fortunately. So, but now it's time to deliver. And I was a fierce advocate taxpayer and made some enemies. I'm sorry, but what did Winston Churchill say? You got enemies, good, because that means you're doing something. And being a fierce advocate taxpayer means special interests are going to be angry with you. And not to get into the news of politics, because it's a lot like talking about your cat. You better wrap it up in 30 seconds. You're going to lose everybody in the room. But they were going to build a $100 million arts hall. That's not the role of municipal government. And so anyway, we defeated that, and we moved on. But then I ran for state rep against, as I said, the Joe Strauss person, and we won. But then there was an election for Speaker of the House in 2015. 150 members, you need 76 votes to win. And I had always promised people that I would vote for the most conservative candidate for Speaker. And that was clearly Scott Turner, who used to represent you all here.
Yes.
Yeah, Scott was great. He used to. And I voted for Scott Turner. I was one of the 19 of the 150 that voted for Scott, knowing we were going to lose the race. But does your word mean something or not? And you know what they do when you vote against the current speaker? They ostracize you socially. I didn't really care because I didn't go out much and I didn't go to Austin to make friends. And Austin's terrible. Every time I leave Texas to go to Austin, I want to come back to Texas as quickly as I can. And their motto is keep Austin weird. They are succeeding wildly. But it's the right thing to do. And you know, you go on and on and on. And then you have to find your best and highest use. And that's sometimes the struggle, right? Is to ban the possibility of an income tax in Texas for our lifetimes. It can never happen.
All right.
One of the strengths of the people here in Texas, and I was born in Texas, although I've lived elsewhere, is if you're not going to run for an office, be strong enough, be mature enough to support the candidates that you vet and you know are the right, most qualified people, and don't be afraid to tell the world that's who you support. That is the most important thing. Don't shy away from it. The people that are here tonight to support Pat, I support Pat, and there are other people that I support. And I make no secret about it. And people who have known me, I've been here 35 years in Rockwall. And when I say I support someone, I do that 24/7, 365. I've always been very honest and very proud. If I say I support you, you take it to the bank. I support you, and you can take it to the bank. He's a man of his word. When I've called you and I've asked, why did you vote one way or another, he's honest. He'll tell me, well, this bill had something in it I couldn't go with. Or this bill I went with because of this. There's been transparency. I've always been okay and agreed with what you've done. So you have my total support, and I hope the people here too.
I'm going to give Gary the microphone anytime he asks for it. He's the voice of God. I wish I could speak like him.
Hi there. Jerry. Luke, I'm your father.
So real quickly, so I get to DC in January last year, and I knew it was going to be a hyper-partisan environment, and they didn't disappoint. But it's sad, because not everything should be partisan. You're talking about transportation, that literally shouldn't have anything to do with partisanism at all. It's roads. And we need to build the roads that are old, we need to patch them up, and we need to build roads where the people are. And we need to fix our bridges, our waterways, and we need broadband internet for everyone. Rural areas, suburban and urban. But you don't get that in DC, because they make everything partisan. And that doesn't make for good government. Because they're always doing, if they're Democrats, they're always doing the Democratic thing instead of the American thing. So when we do take over the majority, I want to make sure that we can work toward changing the culture. Now, the Republicans will be the adults in the room, largely. But we need to do the American thing moving forward. So the very first, #1 priority for Nancy Pelosi was a bill called H.R. 1, which was going to federalize our elections. I can't tell you how dangerous that is. So what specifically H.R. 1 was going to do was they were going to eviscerate voter ID. No more voter ID in the country, universal mail-in ballots. Felons could vote immediately upon getting out of prison. That's a direct violation of the 14th Amendment, Section 2, in case you didn't know that. It's up to the states to be able to decide and determine whether or not a felon will ever get the chance to vote again. It's up to the states. And then they had weird provisions. You couldn't purge the voter rolls. They wanted same-day registration. And how about this odd thing? If you're going to donate $200 to me, thank you, by the way. The federal government, the U.S. Treasury, would match that times 6. Yeah, that's not a good use of your tax dollars or mine to compel you to donate to candidates you don't agree with. Because the Democrats did the math and they get a lot more donations, small donations of $200 or less. So they wanted to multiply it by 600%. That was in that bill. That bill was awful. It stunk. It still stinks. You smell that? Ugh. And then H.R. 4 was really no better. So they passed out of the House. They died in the Senate, thank God, because of the filibuster. And then it was like Rasputin. You couldn't quite kill it. They took a NASA bill, they shelled it, and they stuffed that back in there. Now, if this was a $100 million winning lottery ticket, and you can redeem it, by the way, in every state one of 2 ways. You can walk it in, or you can mail it in. Anybody here going to mail it in? $100 million? No, you're not going to mail it in. You're going to walk it in. Why is our right to vote and our duty as a citizen any less sacrosanct? We should walk it in. Unless you're infirmed, you're not going to be in the district or in the state at the time, you should vote in person. With a picture ID. That is not racist. You want to talk about the argument of soft bigotry, low expectations. The Democrats are saying that people of color are incapable or are going to have more trouble getting an ID. The people of color don't believe that. It's incredibly insulting. You look at any of the polls, 94% of people in America believe it's easy to vote. Because you know what? It is easy to vote. You can't get 94% of the American people to believe that the sky is blue on a clear day. But they think it's easy to vote, because it is. You know what other thing I want? Video surveillance of those boxes at all times, 24/7. I want Republicans and Democrats to be able to watch the process. I'm perfectly fine with it. I was over in Rockwall's a very Republican area. Our district largely is. I was in Fannin County, up in Bonham, very Republican area, and I said, I want the Democratic watchers to be able to see what's going on up here. I have no problem with that. Everybody cheer, yay! Because we're not cheating. We're fine. We're going to have a close election sometimes. We need to believe in the result. It's okay if you win by a little or you lose by a little, so long as everybody believes it was fairly done. Florida, George W. Bush won the presidency by 500 votes thereabouts. The presidency of the United States. If you're running for mayor in Rockwall, 500 vote difference is a close race. For the presidency, it's a tie that went your way. But you got to believe in the result. You have to believe that it was fair. Not that a water main breaks and everybody's got to leave and we're going to count later and turn the cameras off. The excuses that the left uses is remarkable to go against election integrity. We had, the Texas Democrats that ran away? Yeah. 3 of them appeared in front of the Oversight Committee on a subcommittee. I wasn't on the subcommittee. I am on the Oversight Committee generally, but not on the subcommittee. They juiced me in and let me ask questions, and a lot of the other members seated me there 5 minutes. And I knew all 3 of the members because I served with each 3 of them in the Texas House. And I got to drill them. And Nancy Mace, I gave her a script to read, and she did a great job with asking one of the Democratic members, when you get on an airplane, what do you use? Do you use a photo ID?
Yes.
When you buy a car, do you need an ID?
Yes.
When you go to the movies, if you're 18, do you need an ID?
Yes.
This is my favorite one. This is our IDs for members of Congress. It's a photo ID! You can't get in the building without this. You can't vote without this. We insert them into a reader, and then we press a button.
That's so racist.
It makes absolutely no sense. Voter ID is fine. President Trump, that's the biggest thing for him, obviously, is he knew the Russia hoax was a lie the whole time. They knew it too, though. And they were trying to put his son in prison. When I met with them, it's interesting when you're one-on-one with someone, because you can see their eyes. You should have seen the pain in his eyes. It's just me and him. He's not handing it up for the cameras. It was genuine from the heart. He said, Pat, they tried to put my son in prison. In prison, and he knew they were lying. The ultimate penalty for treason is death. They want to put my son in prison. If they're capable of doing that, they're capable of stuffing ballot boxes. See how it's easy it is for him to, and that's the left want to get up. They don't want to talk about the Russia hoax because it served a purpose for them. And then we had runaway spending. We had the COVID relief bill was $1.9 trillion, which is 1,900 billion. Only 91% of it, though, wasn't going to COVID relief. Only 9% was. And we already had an American Rescue Plan before I even got to Congress. There was $1 trillion of that money that was left unspent. What did you need any further spending for? You didn't need it. And then the infrastructure bill. Remember that, Biden? So I can do a somewhat decent Trump impression.
Pat, you live in America. I love you. You're the best.
But this is my Biden impression. I mean, sleepy, super sleepy Joe. He said to us, we needed $2.25 trillion or the country was going to fall apart in infrastructure spending. And then he couldn't get enough Democrats to agree to that. So he had to reduce it to $1.2 trillion. And then he said it was paid for. Unfortunately for him, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, did not agree. And they said, no, there's actually going to be a $430 billion hole in the budget if you pass this. So I was already a hard no on that. And then 88% of it wasn't even going to go to infrastructure anyway. It was going to go to a myriad of other things, but not what we would consider true traditional infrastructure. And then then they came up with what they called the Build Back Better. Can you say that for me in your dog voice?
Build back better.
I called it the Biden-Bernie bankruptcy boondoggle, or the Quad B. So the Quad B, they said it was going to cost $1.75 trillion. But the unfortunate thing is, it was going to create 150 new federal programs. It used the word tax penalty, fee, or interest 650 times, equity 32 times. And if you looked at the budget going, or the debt, 30 years from now, in today's dollars, going the way we're going, the debt's going to be 118 trillion. It's awful, awful. But if Build Back broke had passed, or the Quad B, it would be 140 trillion. So there's very good argument to be made that that was going to cost $22 trillion. Can't have it. Just can't. In that bill, they wanted to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. Take the budget from $12 billion to $80 billion. I don't know, anybody here want 87,000 new IRS agents? Not one hand. We had some Democrats up in Bonham. They didn't even raise their hand on that one. You know what I want? 87,000 new Border Patrol agents. They're going to do your job. And then Janet Yellen wanted to give them the authority to pry into all of our bank accounts, provided you had $10,000 worth of aggregate activity in your account in a given year. You pay your mortgage, you spend, live your life, and buy groceries, it usually comes out to $10,000 or more. So that's almost every American would be subject. So is it 1984 or is it 2022? Because that sounds a little fishy. And that, fortunately, also, you got to pray, if you forgive me, I'm praying every night for a Democrat from West Virginia. Every night. And even one from Arizona. Because they wouldn't fall for it. But then we've got to take CRT, critical race theory. I call it communist race theory. It's drivel. It's leftist propaganda. It pits one American against another. And you know what I was taught? That every life has value. Every life has equal value. We are all made in the Lord's image. And you have to take that very seriously. Because when you start saying that some people have more weight than others, that didn't work out too well in Central Europe last century, did it? Because then their lives don't mean as much. First they start with your opinion doesn't mean as much. That's why AOC, every chance she gets, says, I'm a woman of color. And I can say, well, I can see that from literally looking at you. I don't know why you need to mention it again. I'm a stocky man of whiteness. You can see that looking at me. Why would I mention it? It's immaterial also, incidentally. It doesn't matter. It makes no difference whatsoever. Is your heart beating blood, red blood through your system? Yes. For everyone on the planet. So we have to be very careful about their divisiveness, very careful about their identity politics. And that, it leads in immigration. They don't want immigrants to come here and be successful and be independent, because those folks on that ain't going to vote for the Democratic Party. If you're dependent, if you can't speak the language, you can be manipulated a lot easier, can't you? Yes, it's very powerful. You read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer, 1,000 pages, but it's fascinating. And it goes, the point I'm making here, the press is so powerful. If you continue to say something over and over and over again, people start to think that it must be at least partially true. It can be a complete lie. But if they're saying it over and over, there's got to be some, you know what I hear so often? Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. No, sometimes it's just smoke. A lot of times. But William Shirer said, you know, he moved to, he's American, spoke German, journalist in 1929, when the production journalists still left the world. And he was in Berlin. In Berlin, the Nazis were never really popular in Berlin. And Hitler took power in January 1933. And all of his friends, all of Shirer's friends would make fun of Hitler and Goebbels, because what ended up happening was thugs and criminals took hold of an entire nation state. Very powerful nation state in Central Europe. But 4 years after Goebbels got a hold of all the radio and all of the media, the newspapers and the cinema, Shire would have those conversations with his friends at lunch, having coffee and a beer, and they'd say, yeah, you know, they got a point. Those Nazis, they got some points. Because they were inundated with so much misinformation, some of it seeped in. That's why when President Trump says, he said it, I was with him in Houston and Conroe a couple nights ago, he said the fake news media is the enemy of the people. And then CNN went crazy. Oh my God, I can't believe it's Fallon. He didn't say the media was the enemy of the people. He said fake news is the enemy. Lies are the enemy. And we're all subject to it when we're in office, particularly if you are, like me, a Texas conservative Christian Republican. You're in their crosshairs. You have no redeeming qualities. You do anything. If I sneeze, they'll write an article about how I spit on someone. I mean, that's just what they do. But it's part and parcel to the job, and you need to know it going in. It's juiced into the deal, so you can't get too upset with it. But we need to fight against that. I mean, CRT is horrific. And then we've got inflation, worst inflation we've had in 40 years. 40 years. And they stay at 7%. Fuel's up 50%. And it fluctuates. You know, next month it can be 60 and 55 or whatever. Home heating, 30%. Yeah, lumber's up 40%. Ask any farmers about fertilizer. Up 400%. And somehow they make it to where it's 7%. We're in the bad old days of double-digit Jimmy Carter inflation. They just haven't admitted it yet. And that's going to happen when you inject $5 trillion into the money supply. Of course things are going to cost more, because you've got more money. What Joe Biden has done is made all of us poor. Because most Americans probably didn't, even though the market went up a lot last year. A lot of people, if you're not in the market, did you get a 7% return on your savings? Now, if it was in the bank with that point, whatever it is now, 0.002, right? So we're all poor. It is an invisible tax on us all on everything we buy. That's just what it is. So we just want to get to the border. Well, you know what, why don't we start taking some questions, Mayor, and then I can talk about the border, because they'll probably come up with questions.
Nah, it's not in there at all.
I know. After having so many of these town halls, there's going to be a question about the January 6th detainees. There's going to be a question about the border. There's going to be a question about our veterans, probably, and maybe possibly Taiwan and Ukraine. It's pretty consistent theme.
I can talk about this. I don't know, Pat. I left for about 2 minutes and I walked back in the front row and taken over, so I don't know about it. Turning this back over to you. I can't see that. Do you agree with our current state rep that Texas can't do anything about the border other than wait 3 years for a Republican president? What are you doing?
Well, what we should, so real quickly on the border, there have been 160,000 or more illegal border crossings for 10 months in a row. That's never happened before in our history. There were 2 million illegal border crossings last calendar year. That's never happened in our history. The cartels are making wild profits, more than they ever have. Their GDP is estimated to be $30 billion, which is the size of a small nation state. We have NATO allies in the Baltic, Estonia, and Latvia that have comparable GDPs. That's unbelievable that we're allowing the most dangerous and evil people on the planet control our southern border. To define a nation is borders, language, culture. If you don't have those, you don't have a nation. Canada, how many do they've had 2 votes in Quebec to secede because they speak French. Belgium is not really a functional country. They've got the French speakers and they got the Dutch. You need a common language. You need a common culture, shared culture, and you need borders, or you don't have a country. And there's almost 11,000 pounds of fentanyl seized at the border alone last year. That's enough fentanyl to kill every American 7 times over. Almost 200,000 pounds of methamphetamine on the border. I'm not even talking about inland seizures or at the ports. I'm talking about on the border with Mexico. You know, if you watch Breaking Bad, in that big giant meth lab they had hidden underneath in New Mexico underground, they don't even hide it in Mexico. They're above ground. They're making it because they pay off the government. Mexico is a de facto narco state. They just are. And the oligarchy has an illicit agreement with them to get paid off, and there's billions to be made. So, and oh, you want to talk about human smuggling? This is, I'm co-hosting with Lynn. She's been great. Well, because you know what, Lynn? There is slavery and indentured servitude in the United States of America in 2022. This is how it happens. Cartels, particularly folks that live southern Mexico and Central America, they're so poor they don't even have the money for the transit to the United States. So they say, you know what we'll do? Don't worry about paying us. We'll get you up to the United States, but when you get there, you have to work for us. You have to work it off. That's indentured servitude. What are young women going to do to work that off? They're going to become roofers in Baltimore? I mean, they give them a cover story, then they lie to the Border Patrol, and then the Border Patrol, on our taxpayer dollars, fly them to wherever they say they have friends or family. This is ridiculous. We've added nearly the entire population of West Virginia. And those folks can't function. A lot of them have 6th grade educations. They don't speak the language. They're behind the 8 ball. And they're poor. You know what shocked me back in 2013? Take a gander at the percentage of kids coming into this world in Texas, births that are paid for with Medicaid. 56% 9 years ago. That's unsustainable. It's probably over 60% now. It could even be 70%. 70% of our children being born in Texas are being born into poverty today. What's that going to look like 20 or 30 years from now? Borders, language, culture. What I would do, I'm not the governor, not running the government, but I love the Ron DeSantis approach to so many things. Push the limits. Go right up to that line, push them, and make them push you back. Don't sit there and say, oh, it's a federal deal. No, push them.
That's right.
Push it. Build the wall. It was a crime. It was criminal. I'm sitting there with President Trump at the border with his fence. It was beautiful. And there's giant holes in it because Biden ceased construction immediately upon swearing in. And the materials were there. The contractors were there. We had the skilled labor there to build it. It was paid for. He said no, because he's weak and he's woke. And we're all paying the price. We're all less safe. If you want to have great school board members, great city councilmen, great state legislators, Congress, president, are they going to make and keep you safe? There's no higher calling, because if you're not safe, then you're not free. And we're allowing Mexico to export their poverty and their crime. Most of the folks in that country are wonderful people, but the cartels prey on those wonderful people, and then they're preying on us. So when the left injects race into the argument of people that love legal migration and are against illegal immigration, this is what we say. 3.8 million people are waiting to come to this country legally. All over the world. 95% of those people are people of color. They're not coming from Europe or Australia or Canada. They're coming mostly from Africa, Asia, Central America, South America, Mexico. And these are exactly the kinds of people you want to come to your country. They're respecting the laws and the rules of the country that they want to become a part of. 1% of the entire country of Mexico is waiting to come to this country legally, waiting in Mexico. 1 million people. See, because if they come legally, and they wait their 9 years and they prove English proficiency and they have a skill, let's say we always need welders, right? We're desperate for skilled labor. If you have the skill, you are employed. It's not even job security. It's better than that. It's employment security. Right? You know, Cooper Kupp, the best receiver right now. I don't watch the NFL, but I thought that was a really funny name. Cooper Kupp. This is a great receiver. You think if the Los Angeles Rams didn't want him anymore, could he find a job? Yeah. How about a Babe Ruth? Got fired by the Yankees in 1930. You think he could have found a job? Yeah. If you're a welder or an electrician or a plumber, yeah, if you can fix my dishwasher, I'll employ you. You got employment security. But they don't want people like that coming to the left because they're not dependent on them. They're not dependent on government. And a really smart fellow in Florida told me, Pat, you gotta understand the Democrats. Their power comes from the problem, not the solution. And then they'll invent the problem. We all know that racism in this country is a diminishing phenomenon. And it still exists. It's always going to exist to some degree. There's always some jerk out there. But it's a diminishing phenomenon every single day. Tomorrow will be better than today. Today was better than yesterday. The 2022 was better than 2002. And 2002 was better than 1982, etc. But they don't want to see it that way. They don't want people thinking for themselves. They want you culturally to vote a certain way and be done with it. But they're having a problem. People are waking up. And in South Texas, the mayor answered your question, those folks on the border, almost all Hispanic, they voted Republican in droves. Hallelujah, saving Texas, saving the country. There was a fellow, Ryan Dean, the state rep that I served with, 18-year Democrat. I sat down and met with him. And I said, Ryan, you got to switch. It's about time. He's real pro-life, pro-gun. He even told me, now I can tell you now, I had to keep it secret for years. He's like, Pat, I vote for the Republicans for president. I'm like, I know you do, right? We couldn't say anything. In fact, there was another state senator, I won't say, he's retiring, but I won't say his name, but he's hard of hearing, but he's really conservative, he lives on the border, and he's talking to me one day, and he took his hearing aid out. And he's talking like this, but he doesn't think he is, and he's trying to tell me a secret. And I said, because there's other Democrats around. And he says, Pat, I vote for the person, I don't vote for the party. The Democrats are listening to him. I go, hey, shh. He goes, no, I voted for President Bush twice. But they're changing. So Ryan, I said, Ryan, I'm going to meet with President Trump in November. I'm going to mention him to you. I'm going to mention you to him, rather. And so President Trump got really excited. I told him the story. He said, Pat, it's great. Hold on one second, hold on. And he goes and gets a hat. It says, Save America. He says, I want you to give this to Ryan, okay? And he signs it. Ryan Keane sounds awesome. I'll see if I can endorse him. I'm going to check him out. Okay, Pat, you got to check him out first. I said, okay. So he signs that and gives it to me. He endorsed him. Ryan switched parties. Ryan is a Republican. President Trump won Zapata County in 2020. He lost it by 30 percentage points in 2016. He almost won Stark County. Same thing. He lost it to Hillary Clinton by about 35%. We're going to win. We have one Republican-held seat on the board right now, Tony Gonzalez, a conservative. We're going to have another one, Congressional District 15, Monica de la Cruz is probably going to win that one. But we might win a third one in CD 34. And it's a gal named Mayra Flores. She's coming up to Dallas tomorrow, or next week for a fundraiser. She's a pistol. Her husband's a Border Patrol agent. She's in her 30s, and she's funnier than all get out. She posts stuff on Facebook. Sometimes I borrow it, sometimes she borrows my stuff. She had one post that said, I just tested positive for not living in fear. That's nice.
All right, good transition. Step back.
This is a COVID question, so great transition. Over the last several months, it's become abundantly clear that Dr. Fauci and government health agencies have been lying to us about COVID tests and treatments, masks, and the safety and efficacy of these so-called vaccines. What would you do to hold these people accountable and address these issues going forward? And we had another very similar, I'm going to go ahead and get that one too. Is there any discussion in Congress regarding the consequences or accountability for the Chinese bioweapon nicknamed COVID? Is there an effort underway to deal with Fauci?
Yeah, two great questions. I have 3 very simple steps to save America. And if you haven't gotten it in your mailbox yet, it's coming to you soon. Follow the science. Fire Fauci, fight for our freedoms. Really simple, 1, 2, 3 right there. When you mix politics with medicine, there's 2 results. Bad politics, bad medicine. Okay? We didn't know a lot about this disease. We still don't know a lot.